Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're running an interview series to promote some positivity in the sector, and as such, I have the privilege of speaking to some amazing business leaders about their personal and professional journeys. So hopefully you finish this session feeling energized and refreshed and ready to go and kind of like kill your day. Now, so obviously as a recruiter, all of my children are special, but this interview I am especially excited about because today we're speaking to Robin Rowland. How are you, Robin?
I'm very well, Chris. Thank you.
Excellent. I can see the blush already. There he goes. I remember coming to see you, I'm going to say 15 years ago. I think it might have been 20 years ago at your office in Farringdon when you were running Yo. And your PA was absolutely lovely, but was very efficient and said, you're going to get half an hour with them. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to talk about. And you basically sat me down for 2.5 hours. You pulled out MCA, the Peach Tracker, all of these different reports and a highlighter. And I think that you'd asked me a question about what I understood about the restaurant sector, and I don't think you were very happy with the answer that I gave you. So I got a whole education about the restaurant sector and the industry, and there's still stuff that I use today, but I just thought it was incredible because I walked out 2.5 hours later with my head spinning and all of this different information about the sector, just looking at it in a way that I'd never thought about before. One, thank you for that experience because it was amazing. And secondly, I've noticed this with you over the years, and especially in some of the feedback, because obviously as a recruiter, you hear things about how people are and how they train and they develop, but that training, development, justice kind of side of things is obviously kind of like, one of your building blocks. Is this something which has developed over time, or do you think it was always there?
Well, I'm part of an alumni. We're very lucky to join on graduate trainee schemes, and I joined Whitbread. I have a lot of friends who joined Bass and Graham Met at that time, and we were given an incredible amount of education by the more senior management teams. They were, forced into us into being their pupils, and I was very lucky. I had three or four extraordinary mentors in my twenties, and I always figure that what I learned then has stood me in good stead. So it's kind of payback time, and I just genuinely love this business. Everyone knows this is my kind of my mastermind subject, but I'm endlessly fascinated by the kind of the chemistry in it and the interconnections. So I probably get much too enthusiastic about certain things, including in our board meetings, and I should. But I'd be slightly doing myself an injustice if I didn't let it freewheel a bit. And fortunately, a lot of candidates do seem to either they're broader by it, but if they engage in the conversation, then I think, actually, this is quite important to me. They do get it, and they're just not just a passenger, and they actually are engaged in the same kind of pursuit of happiness and delivering extraordinary experiences, which we've all used those words easily, but it's much harder to deliver it. And the moving parts, I think, are worth exploring with people in a conversation.
Absolutely. You mentioned four mentors that you had kind of like at the early stage of your career. Can you just give us a little bit about who they are and what kind of like inspired you about them?
Um, well, they're all leaders, operation leaders. There was a guy who did everything from a Michelin star restaurant right through to country pubs and the first food that went into pubs in the 80s, who took me under his wing. At an American extraordinary operator who took me into Old Orleans, which is the kind of forerunner of TGI Fridays, and taught me about scale restaurant business, two, 300 seater restaurants, which really didn't exist in casual dining in the late 80s. And then I was lucky enough to work with Andrew Guy at the restaurant group, who was a mentor to many people in this industry, gave people chances. That's three I will happily mention, but there are many more, and I guess that my peer group should be endlessly grateful for the time and attention given to us at that time.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, the comment that we often hear about institutional investment organizations is they don't understand operations and sometimes they have a bit of a mixed reputation. Now, you know operations obviously extremely well and you know obviously investment very well, or I would hope so with you leading Trispan. So, like, how much of an advantage do you think your operational background is?
Well, I think in my current role, it clearly is a kind of a it's easy to get a key in the door with somebody because you talk their language. And I built Yo Sushi from 2 to 100 restaurants, and I totted them up the other day. I probably signed off on about 500 pubs and restaurants in each of the industry, each of the business I work with. So I kind of understand the journey that many of the people are on. and particularly with meeting entrepreneurs, they are very skeptical, as they should be. They want to know what the add value is. Now it's much easier because you just say, "We'll go and talk to the portfolio that we've invested with, and go and talk to those entrepreneurs about what their experience has been over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years." But to begin with, it did get us into some conversations with in proprietary conversations outside, a process, which is what every investor really wants. They don't really want to engage in auctions. They want some, privileged access to entrepreneurs. And I was lucky enough to work with people like Stephen Wall, who I knew for many, many years. So it is a slight unfair advantage. And then I do think that we bring that to bear on our board meetings, and we really will stick very, very rigidly with talking about what is required for the guests, what's required for the teams, making sure we get a property right. The product has to be AAA, and then profit is an output. Where I've been on the receiving end of investment, where you really just talk about the P&L without really understanding what goes into it. So it's probably more nuanced, our board meetings, as a result, and I think they're more productive because everyone understands the decision making, and it's not a top down. It's very much a kind of a collaborative effort. And literally, I've just come out of a board meeting with Karen Jones, who's a enormously experienced chairwoman herself, and um, we kind of talk in shorthand, but make sure that the exec team are on board. It's a very complimentary experience, the board meetings, and hopefully collaborative, and not something they're fearful about coming into.
Absolutely. Karen's speaking at our International Women's Day event next year, and I'm literally, I don't know if a fanboy is the right word to use, but she's phenomenal.
Mm.
In terms of looking at your stable of brands, and it would be a good time maybe to mention this in maybe in three different parts, but like, so obviously kind of like with Trispan, there's Rosa's, there's Mowgli, and there's the full kind of business, and you've got Thunderbird in there as well, and then you've got a separate vehicle, I believe, which is obviously on the stake side of things with Flatiron. Is there any other parts to the Trispan
Well,
in the UK?
no, no. Well, Flatiron is part of the Rising Stars restaurant program. They're the five businesses in the UK, which there's about 150 restaurants there, and we have four sites in in Paris, which the business is called L'Atelier, and then in America, which is the kind of the other side of the program. We got five businesses in the States, so about 11 businesses, and we have two funds. So this fund is the junior in terms of capital raised against it, but is a significant business with nearly 300 restaurants, over 11 businesses in America and Europe. And we work very collaboratively with our American colleagues. And I, in fact, chair one of the restaurant companies over there. And I chair everything in the UK, which keeps me fairly busy.
I can imagine. And you do stuff outside of Trispan as well. Are you still involved with the pubs?
Yeah, well, part of the deal was having finished with Yo, I was always involved with other boards. And I was at Yo Sushi, and I was the board of Cafe Nero and Marston's at that stage. And I made it sort of, I explained to the Trispan team that I'm I really do. I'm very acquisitive of information, and I like to think in different ways. So working with scale businesses has always been something I've wanted to stay with. So I managed to transition from Marston's to Fuller's about 4 or 5 years ago, which is fabulous. And I stayed with Cafe Nero for a long time. So they're the two other businesses outside the Trispan in a portfolio, which keeps me intellectually engaged. And you do see things through a different lens as a non-executive director on those boards. And they're both scale businesses, high quality businesses run by extremely talented management.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So, in terms of your stable of brands within the UK, within Trispan, like they all seem to be performing extremely well. What do you put this down to, kind of like given the current market challenges?
Well, I mean, and they're always good businesses before we came along, so we can't claim it's anything particularly we've done. But we put fuel on the fire in terms of development capital, so they could grow. Um, they are, I mean, I would say they're good businesses. I think they were future businesses. They weren't legacy businesses. They're always in growth. They had something differentiated about their offer, and they had very talented management teams in place. So all we've done really is augmented that, and it's particularly helped them on thinking through how to grow. And that means the pace of growth, ensuring that the properties they are going to open in, and we've probably we have opened as many restaurants as we invested in the first place. So it was 150 restaurants. We've opened 70 or 80 across the portfolio with them, and we've been there side by side making site decisions with them, and then particularly in terms of scaling, making sure that when they add management team to their teams which, where your expertise comes from, we try and get the jigsaw right. So, and as we all know, it's not just how they got the competence to do the job; it's whether the fit is right and the DNA is right. And the way I see it, all these businesses are a series of tribes. They have particular nuances about them, and they have a particular style. And it's very important to me that the leadership surround themselves with people who are going to be complementary, but somehow embody the spirit of that business that the founder first put in place. So I think we agonize a lot about making sure we make the right decisions, bringing people on board. So we help on that. And then the usual stuff in terms of how we do make them a bit more successful is we're pretty good at looking for efficiencies. We have a team of about six full-time deal team people who work on these two different funds, an army of interns, and I could put any of them to work on efficiencies. And when you're talking about in the scale that we're talking about, the 150 restaurants, there are absolutely opportunities to improve the systems they use, the purchasing they're using, even the utility providers. I mean, it becomes a scale game, which is what I've learned working with other large companies. So we can make them much more efficient without the customer even noticing.
Yeah,
And the teams seem to embrace the shortcuts they're getting. And the investors, we're side by side with management, who are effectively investors, are going to benefit from that very quickly when they come on board. But we are mindful of making sure every single business individuality is celebrated at the same time as um, getting the benefit of working with a much larger group that has more intel than they're probably going to accumulate in the time they've got with us. So hopefully
absolutely.
they have to be a better. I mean, for me, it's always a journey. They have to be a better business when we sell them than we bought them. But it's 101 different things we're doing to help them.
And having that oversight of a business in France and the business in the US as well,
Mm.
like the headwinds, the challenges that you're kind of facing in those markets versus in the UK, are they different?
They are different. I mean, the UK is more challenged for sure. America, I mean, they've always been more resilient at bouncing back. And post-COVID, and with kind of the fairly benign, positive business administration, they are really, really going very well, particularly on the East Coast seaboard. We have restaurants all the way from LA right through to Miami, but certainly there are certain states which the businesses are trading extremely well. So I'm very optimistic for our American portfolio. I think the UK has just been battered by the input costs and the kind of fairly static nature of growth in terms of covers. And we all know there's kind of a finite point about putting up prices, and so we are really it's much more fragile, I think, in the UK in terms of how to grow a business and more challenging. But America are very positive, and France. I mean, everyone is very skeptical about making money in France. Well, you really can if you pick the right concept, and again, if you're very, very smart on margins, and you have a business which has a unique appeal to it. So I'm not. I think France is probably on a parallel with the UK, but it's a slightly different P&L. But the UK P&L, I'm on the UKH board as well. I just think we need a bit more forbearance from government. They got to appreciate we employ 10% plus of the working population, and we've all heard the stories. But it really is an extraordinary power for the UK to have a vibrant, positive hospitality business, in my humble opinion. And now, if it ever was a time to support it, it's now, because we do need to make sure the best to survive, and also there are some that need some help. They need it very quickly.
Absolutely. So from your stable of brands at the moment, I mean, and you don't have to pick favorite children, Robin. I'm not asking you to do that, but would you take them into Europe? Would you take them into America? Like, given your experience with Yo, is it
Yeah,
something you'd advise?
I do want to definitely. I mean, well, it's taking it slightly in reverse. Yo Sushi, we opened restaurants which were company owned and franchised in America. We had restaurants in Russia, had about five or six there. We had restaurants in France, Malaysia, Lisbon, airports throughout the Nordics. And it was an extraordinary learning experience because there was very few people doing restaurant franchises. There were lots of QSR options. This is go back 20, 25 years ago. So a lot of lessons learned on how to do that and how not to do it. I think in today's world, certainly the Middle East is very well understood. Our concepts are extremely um, attractive to that market. We have trusted one of our partners to do Rosa Thai, and we are going absolute gangbusters in Dubai, both in um, full service restaurants and delivery. And we're going to open two, probably the highest grossing restaurants, I suspect, in the Rosa Thai team next year. I think there's lots of opportunity in the Middle East. America, it's about getting the right partner, but our businesses have got huge appeal. I'm just very conscious about scale. You have to have enough sites to make it worth your while. And we work on 5, 7 year timeframes, and we'll have to get going fairly quickly. But the opportunity is definitely there
Absolutely.
for all our brands. I mean, all four. And Central and Europe should not be ignored. There's great opportunity for a couple of our brands in Northern Europe, in my mind.
And sorry, before we move on to the next question, just when you're talking about that scale in North America, kind of like specifically, like how many do you think it would be worthwhile in terms of like that point of, being financially viable?
Two things. There's proof of concept, and then there's financially viable. Um, and private equity is all about uh, a multiple on, which is really about the future value of the business. If you can prove that you can operate in enough different locations or varied locations, I would say probably five is a minimum.
Hmm.
And you need some history as well. So, and then we know that there's a lead time to opening a site, could be 12 to 18 months. So really to get to five, you've probably got to get it, you could probably got 2 or 3 years. We've got to set that aside to make it happen. And we're not the long-term owner of these businesses. We are part of their journey. We're not the end of the journey. So I think it's important that we do get on with it. Um, and I, if something goes incredibly well, you could find a development partner or a franchisee or a joint venture who can accelerate it. But you probably want to be very tight on controlling it when you start. And everyone underestimates the energy it takes to open in foreign markets. It's not like opening in Newcastle or Glasgow. It just isn't. It is a whole new bag of tricks, and it's very much of it around the management, in my experience. Trying to understand how to get fabulous management on board, and you don't always get that right first time round. We,
Absolutely.
we 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 have a slightly unfair advantage though, in as much as we operate 90 restaurants in America, and we're all over the East Coast seaboard, and we're in heavy in Texas, we're in Vegas, and I've got an unfair advantage, I guess, than any other investor because I can pull upon our management teams, and I really love working with them because I lived and worked in America, and it holds me no fear for me.
Excellent, Robin. So when you're looking at other potential investments to bring into the portfolio, I know this is a very broad question, but what do you look for? What's your criteria? What gets you excited?
Um, I mean, it's a kind of I mean, there's a financial piece. We need to back businesses which have got to a proof of concept stage. So it's probably going to be between 8 to 15 restaurants minimum, really, because we need a certain amount of cash flow coming off it, which we feel proves that they've got a business that's viable. I'm really sort of very mindful about, is this food which is going to sustain itself over a 20-year time frame. I mean, I did it with Yo Sushi, and um, I've been involved with Tortilla, which is coming up to a sort of 15, 20 year horizon. Um, so you have to make sure that's right, and I think you have to make sure you've got really, really good management. So we do meet founders which haven't really thought through how to get to the next stage, and I try and get them to at least think about how they're going to spread the load, because we all know the rule of seven, and you can just about get 7 restaurants on your own, running around like a blue hair's fire in the blue hair. But I do think you'd need to start augmenting your team. So I'm looking for at least the embryo of a grown-up team, a proven concept, a future business, great metrics. Ideally, you want a 3-year payback on your investments, which you've proven. You probably want a 20% EBITDA conversion, which is the nirvana for everybody. But I think in today's world, you probably do need to have businesses that are taking average unit volumes. Turnover's got to be aiming for mid 20s plus. Otherwise, it just is much too difficult to make money in the UK. Years ago, that would have been 20 or 15. So we're looking for reasonably high average unit volumes. And then the other bit I suppose I look for is the flexibility of that concept. Could I imagine this operating Copenhagen airport one day? Could I imagine it working um, in Exeter? And not everything has to work everywhere, but has it got enough legs to it? Um, and there's a kind of ethical dimension or sort of a values piece. We don't really want to work with people who aren't going to see the world through our lenses. They have to be pretty self-driven, self-motivated, enthusiastic, positive. We don't like energy sappers. We want people who are actually going to get out of bed and enjoy themselves. And because otherwise, life's too short. And I can't be carrying people. It's really important to work with people who are enthused about their business because I absolutely know their team are going to feed off that. And we meet everybody, and I'm very open with information, and hopefully don't let anybody leave without us giving them a good attention. But you've got to respect the fact that we're risk takers as well, and some invest, some entrepreneurs just see, I think private equity is sort of uh, um, somebody they can just tolerate. Well, that's not how it works. We want partners, and we are. So we're pretty selective. We might do two investments a year. We probably met 50 people to get to that stage. I mean, it
Wow.
sounds like a lot, but some people are on a journey, and it's just not right for them, or they're not ready. When they are ready, I hope they've known about us for a couple of years, so we're not having to dance around each other in a horrible process. I'd rather we felt we'd had some kind of mutuality of relationship, and they've already done some proper due diligence on us because it is a long term. It's a very hard decision to take money from somebody because you are going to live with that decision for a long time. So it's both sides should feel very comfortable. That's a long-winded answer to your very simple but a very good question.
So, do you ever meet entrepreneurs who you just kind of meet who you think are the most incredible, all the people skills, all the skill set, all of that kind of stuff, but there's something flawed in the concept?
Oh, um, yeah, but sometimes I think that they're just missing a trick, or there's something they should do slightly differently. Um, but we met some amazing entrepreneurs um, who of the five Ps have completely missed the importance of getting the right people or the right products because they are so in love with it, don't actually are not self-critical, or they have made some, they continue to make bad decisions around property, um, or they're financially sort of challenged. They just think the sales is going to cure all evils, which it will, but they don't realize that that may not last forever. So you think, hang on, do you understand what happens when the tough times come? But there are some things you can do to help them, and if they are at least mindful enough to listen, you think, well, this could work really, really well. And we've had a very, very good run. I mean, with our four big entrepreneurs, people like Tom Bing, who is a bit like me. He's a kind of he's been around a long time operating businesses. I mean, he's a the I suppose Charlie Carroll built the flat iron business, but Tom's breathed life into it as I did with Yo. Stephen Wall's very much on our board. Alex Moore's on our board with Roses, and just had a board meeting with Nisha. I find their energy intoxicating, and they've been on a journey with us and are as fellow investors and fellow board members, and it can work. Um, but no one, I mean, no one's the full 9 yards. And if a business is perfect, the danger is everyone else probably knows about it.
Absolutely. So, if there was, you've obviously looked at a massive number of investments. If you've been there, calculation in my head probably looks at about 150. So like, was there one that got away?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, one I can probably mention that I was very emotionally engaged, and I thought we had a good chance at, but for a number of different reasons, it slipped away. One would be Sticks and Sushi, which
Oh
has gone
yeah.
to our friends at McWin, which that's a very good home for that business, and I'm a massive fan of um, Andreas Carlson and his development chef, his executive chef Mike used to work for me at Yo, so I kind of always had a kind of a feel for that business. There are a number in America which we looked at and we got outbid on, but we were very, very good at being disciplined about not overpaying or get ourselves into a bidding war. Um, I mean, the other ones I think are a bit too close to home. I don't want to mention it because I'm very respectful of people who chose to go with other partners. But normally, um, it's it it's circumstances which are probably not as obvious to the naked eye why we didn't actually complete on it. But we do try to do deals which work for everybody. So we probably our deals are probably more considered than some others, I suspect. So we won't always pay the wrong high price, but we'll give the bigger upside working with us. So there's a balancing act, and some people decide to just take the money, which is fair. And I don't blame them. But ironically, I think in hindsight, so many people come back and talk to us within a year and ask for advice on how to actually work with their existing investor
Wow.
because it's a long-term marriage. And once you're in, you're in.
Absolutely. So, working between kind of like the US and the UK, one thing that we see kind of like is the attitude to failure. And in the UK, people take failure extremely personally. I am typecasting. And in America, people almost wear it like a badge of honor in terms of like, I earned my stripes, I screwed up, this is what I did. And I guess everything in America is just a little bit more extreme. But I mean, we kind of like find that a lot. That coupled with the kind of like UK media negativity towards, and government, I guess, negativity towards the hospitality sector. Are we doing enough to encourage entrepreneurship into the sector and retaining those people? Is my first part of the question. The second part I wanted to lead on to is that what it takes to be a hospitality entrepreneur, because it's no longer just passion and being great on the floor and great customer service. It's like all of those business skills behind it. You have to be much more, I get the impression, financially and commercially literate now to be a hospitality entrepreneur. What's your take on that?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think, but a really great entrepreneur has probably got a slight streak of madness because they're a monomaniac about their product. They're obsessed about it, and they have got passion, but it's passion with competence and some financial belts and braces around it. To your point, take someone like Jonathan Ocanti, who's doing amazing stuff with Farmer J. I mean, he will not compromise on what he wants to do, and he thinks four-dimensionally about everything he does. That's not your, ill-advised or thoughtless entrepreneur. I mean, there are other examples. I think the Pizza Pilgrim Boys did an extraordinary job of their business. But you probably, I mean, but you probably won't get it in the same body. You do need to have I mean, I needed really good financial partners. I have a sense of the right direction, and I'm humble enough to know I'm not the best marketeer or the best, food developer. So I've always got talented people around me. Um, but even an entrepreneur, just to get to the staging post of raising money, has probably got to have a good financial partner, I think. And actually, to raise money, they definitely need one. So unless they come from the financial world, which means they probably aren't wired enough generally to um, think as creatively as they need to be. It's a terrible typecast as well. Well, there are some brilliant financial people who could pull it off. It's normally two people who pull it together, and there may be a quiet partner behind the very noisy leader. But I think you also need to have some extraordinary self-confidence because winning people over, winning sites, winning contracts does not come to the faint-hearted. You have to have an innate self-belief that allows you to push through, adversity. You have to be resilient. You have to be self-motivated, and you have to carry a team, and you have to make tough decisions. And all those things don't come for nothing. I mean, you really, I think, need to be a bit of an all-rounder today, and maybe you could get away with a little bit in the past, but um, and the bit about Americans, they are remarkably resilient at picking themselves up. They're not punished for failure. They will deal with sites that don't work much quicker than we will in the UK generally. Obviously, they are. You can employ at will, so you can let people go very quickly. So there's absolutely zero empathy when they do let somebody go. It's like the people move on, and then people don't talk about legacies because they don't think they're going to create one because somebody's going to take them out on the way through. Um, but in a way that's refreshing. And there's kind of a bluntness about America, which I like, but there's also a shortism and determinism, sometimes a lack of patience, which I don't always admire because I think they sometimes don't think through all the consequences, but they make things happen. And they also don't sit there feeling making excuses or blaming other people. They do take it. They do actually get on and make. And I enjoy the speed of what happens in a month in
Yeah.
America. Um, in the UK, sometimes we're stuck with the some mud to get through. But I think Americans are better at moving forward and say not carrying the stigma of failure on the back.
Absolutely, I completely agree. In terms of different companies need different things at different sizes of their development and their growth. And people always talk about maybe the 1 to 5 or the 1 to 7 versus what you need to get to 20, when you need to get to 100, that kind of side of things.
Mm.
And then you get this kind of so one of our specialist skill sets as a recruiter is that finding somebody to partner with the entrepreneurs in terms of kind of taking on that relationship and maybe the implementer to the creative in terms of that kind of growth. You're probably the ultimate example of that with the Yo Sushi side of things in terms of somebody that took the original vision and kind of cascaded it kind of like onwards. And you must see this happening within lots of different organizations where sometimes that works and it works incredibly well. I mean, Gavin Pizza Pilgrims, we all love Pizza Pilgrims, right? But absolutely kind of like exceptional. But in terms of advice, A, for the entrepreneur in terms of selecting that individual, and secondly, I guess, for the individual in terms of creating that membrane, I guess is for lack of a better phrase, that can kind of like contain the entrepreneur and take the good bits kind of like to pass to the organization. What advice would you kind of give and what steps do you think somebody should put in place if they're on that journey?
Well, if I cast myself, we have three CEOs. Well, four CEOs actually have done that journey as I did. But none of them just suddenly fell into that role. All of them they put in a good shift, maybe 2 years of learning the business with the entrepreneur before they were allowed or elevated into that role. To have the arrogance of walking in and saying, "Oh, I know how this works," and then suddenly, being given all the reins. I think it's really dangerous. There's a has to be a high balance of trust. So for anybody to let somebody else play with their baby, it does take time. So I think to get for my advice to an entrepreneur is find somebody who's going to be respectful, who probably has got more experience than you have, or will have more experience on how to scale the business, and is still going to listen to you and keep you um, involved. I mean, you will still be the majority, a much bigger shareholder than that person running your business. So it's a very interesting dynamic because you're putting a lot of faith in that person's ability to deliver future value. But for both parties, there's a kind of a courtship and a length of time, and then make sure you build a team which is not just one person's fan club. I think it's important that each of those CEOs, and we make sure that they don't um, lose the DNA of the founder. Or so in our case, the Moores, Alec, Saifan is still doing all our food development, and Juliet does all that, and Faux, and the team have to be able to talk to their language, and it must be done in a way which is respectful. Um, and all I do is try and look out for where those tensions can arise. But it does work, and the entrepreneur is then relieved of the stuff they find tiresome and burdensome. It could be around finance, it could be around managing teams, it could be around site finding or whatever it is. But you allow the founder to do what they're brilliant at, um, and and then you'll find that the business can grow. Otherwise, the business will be constrained by their own experience, which by definition, unless they have run a 50 or 100, 300 site business, they're not going to learn that any time soon. I mean, it took me 20 years to get to, or 15 years to get to 150 restaurants running them. Um, and I was working with the best of the best and basically being moved from one organization to another to do it. Um, that does not come, easy. And I don't think an entrepreneur will learn it on the job without some help.
Absolutely. Now, I know we just touched on the subject of kind of failure, and failure is obviously part of life. We all learn from it, all that kind of stuff, and trying to rebalance that word kind of like in everybody's vocabulary a little bit, because trying to make it a little bit more healthy. But not every day is a sunny day in business. We've had a lot of sunny days in business, but they're not all so. Can you tell me a little bit about a failure that you've had and what you've learned from it?
Well, I've had loads, I guess, in my career, but I just shrug
Just
off and
choose
move
one.
on. But I mean, but um, I, I think the one that if when I to finally hang my hat up, I will still feel that was a real um, um, mistake, and it's something I could have seen coming. It was and it's what I've warned a lot of people about going internationally. Is your choice of partner is about the most important thing. It doesn't matter what's in written paper. It doesn't matter what the contract says because it's meaningless once you're in business together. And for all sorts of reasons, the Yosushi contracted with a partner who was very liberal with his understanding of what his territory was. So we had to clean up a mess when we finally parted company on locations. And that was painful and costly. And frankly, it was bad business because he was somebody who would never, if we spent more time with him, we would have done business with. And at Yosushi, we were very, very obsessed about only doing business with people we liked. And it's a really strange thing to say, but 9 times out of 10, you get it right. And I don't think we had spent enough time on understanding who this individual was. This is 15 years ago, but it was a very difficult and expensive and painful problem to resolve. And I think it all comes down to kind of not spending enough time or trusting your judgment or being rushed into a bad decision. So I regret that, and I tell that story to anybody who is rushing into partnering with people. Um, it just takes time, and we rushed it, and we backed the wrong horse, and we're not the first or last to do that. But that was without my control. But then it cost well, it is a very difficult thing for us to unpick afterwards, which we did.
I can only imagine. Now, this is meant to be a positive, upbeat series,
Oh,
obviously, that we
good.
want to put out there. Yeah, which is good. So we've spoken about the failure side of things, which is like, a nice thing. But obviously, the sector is facing challenges, it's facing headwinds. There is lots of negativity within the sector about the current government and kind of like, what they're doing. I mean, I think Kate Nicholl actually gave a speech the other day and said she wasn't sure if the government was going to go full term, which I thought was quite a contentious thing to say, but there you go. But like, what do you think UK hospitality needs? And like, just from a long-term perspective, what do you think the government could do to reinsert, I guess, that investor confidence that seems to be a little bit lacking at the moment?
Well, it's kind of two questions. UKH is doing an amazing job in terms of explaining to government the realities of running businesses, a hospitality business. The problem is probably is not it's not the sector which government are favouring right now and giving as much airtime as they need to. But the UKH team will not give up the fight, reminding them how vibrant a community it is, and also it's one of the ones that pays tax back faster than most because the speed at which our cash generation compared with building nuclear power stations um, takes is self-evident, and it just is it's a nonsense not allowing this sector to thrive. What could the government do? The government, I think, should reduce VAT, and I'm a slightly lone voice in this. So it's not a UKH, top line mandate, but we'd love to do it. But the reality is, when you look at what's happening in Ireland or in Germany, I mean, that is a lifeblood. If you can just circle cash back into the industry, it will get reinvested. Um, it'll create more jobs. It is a sector that is disproportionately taxed for the complexity of the business it operates and the fact it basically pays high business rates, has a huge labour bill, which wasn't like that 15, 20 years ago. Um, and it's not a digital economy. You can basically keep jacking up the price because you've got people on 1 year contracts, and I can't give up my Amazon Prime or whatever. I think the pricing that's gone through digital that we haven't been able to put through in the analog business should allow us to give some kind of breathing space. But I think it's VAT is where I'd be going, and the business rates debacle, which has affected certainly hotels and many small pubs businesses, is a mistake. I think and my plea to government, and everyone should be talking to their MPs, and I'm now my MP's new best friend. They should be trying to explain to them about how our business works, and it is a very sensitive equation on what we can put through on pricing, and it doesn't always stick, and it will come, and it means you can't keep up with inflation, and that is an unfair equation when you are still creating jobs. So I'm just trying to circle it back. If I was a government, I would try to create jobs, and I do think hospitality is an extraordinary place for people to start their careers. So give us a break and tax the businesses which are making indecent profits, operating out of warehouses and digitally. Good. I'm delighted for them, but frankly, one, they should be paying their taxes in the UK
Yeah,
and not for
100%.
some undomiciled foreign entity, and equally they should be paying more than us because they can afford to. But the government, I think, has got a lot of issues to deal with, and it's complex, and the global order is extremely confusing for them. So this may keep on dropping from their attention. But the UK's job is to keep putting it back up on the agenda. Uh,
Absolutely.
and they, I mean, in UK, it just has to be very resilient with not just changes of government, but the changes of the people within government. And I think what people don't realise is you have to start lobbying every single new minister who comes in, and there's been a lot of churn. So that's been part of the problem, I guess, with the Labour government coming in. One hopes we'll have more traction going forward. We'll need to.
100%. You touched on it a little bit there, but in terms of like the sector itself, like experiential operations, technology, like everything's changing kind of all the time, and it's changed a lot, kind of like, especially kind of like it feels like in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
in terms of the way that that's kind of like all implemented as well. There's lots of reports out that kind of AI is going to eat 20% of jobs and all of this kind of stuff. What excites you about kind of like innovation at the moment, and what do you think we've got coming down the line in the next couple of years?
Well, across, I mean, all our report care boards. I mean, we're looking at AI for better labor scheduling, making sure we've got the best of class, I mean, world class systems to do that. I think there's a lot around forecasting, which you can do with technology. I want to make sure we've got the best technology in the manager's hands and with the servers to make sure that they can do their jobs more efficiently. I think that I kind of love or hate it. I think the thing that really tees me off is when I want to leave a restaurant and aren't able to leave quickly. And when you think I'm touching 65, I'm probably not target audience, but to be held hostage in a restaurant or a bar, and also sitting in a bar and not being able to order my drink from a table, like I think there's more we can do with technology to give a slicker, smoother service experience. So I'm excited by all that. And then robotics, I've had a good look at. I think that may help us one day, but it's still pretty clunky from what we've seen so far. But I think the end-to-end meal experience, ability to manage the business, and be more efficient, all that stuff is definitely within our grasp. And then a bit about social media and digital. I've been on this journey with Yo from 2000, and being digitally relevant and making sure you create noise, and it's noise that sticks, and I find it endlessly fascinating all the different platforms that keep opening up. So I'm really excited because I think that eating is, you know apart from the weight loss drugs of invasion, I think it's the one most exciting things people can do in their lives, and everyone's an expert on food. So why not make it fun and entertaining, and make it really newsworthy and noisy and exciting, and do it well, and be authoritative and informative. And that's what digital can do, and it can do it at a relatively low cost compared with the old days.
And you love, obviously love this sector, you love this industry. You obviously, I mean, you could be doing kind of like 100 different things at the moment if you chose to. I'm absolutely sure, Robin. But you love this sector, you love this industry, you love being out in this sector, in this industry as well. I mean, in a very responsible way. I was at a bar with you not too long ago, and you doing a shot and all of that kind of stuff, and like you enjoy the sector,
Mm.
what keeps you motivated? What keeps you kind of like engaged? What keeps you kind of like going on that kind of side of things?
Well, my best days out this month. I mean, it wasn't having a shot at the Lower Flagler. It's actually been going to. I was in Bristol. We had an opening for Flatiron. The team took me around the restaurant. We were talking about, how they deal with an extraordinary queues, and we got four restaurants very close, and it was an immense pleasure going between each restaurant, meeting the management teams, and some know me, some don't so much, but I'm always interested in what people have to say, and I love the kind of dynamic how dynamic it is in cities. I mean, I've had this absolutely extraordinary career watching all the cities in the country change and evolve. So that I find interesting and exciting, and watching people why they do what they do, where they do it, in a kind of odd way. Always found interesting. And then I was in Cardiff the same day, and Bristol is very different to Cardiff, and you walk around and see the redevelopment of that city. But again, to me, it's just meeting people in the trade and actually listening to them, because you're probably talking to some very, very bright people in a formative part of their life. And my children, in the early 20s. So I've always tried to listen and learn, because actually they're the customers of tomorrow. So I get more of a buzz out of that. I love working with the boards we have here. Um, and that's kind of what keeps me most excited.
Absolutely. Now, looking back, and it's not always the case, but often kind of like, we work in recruitment again, there will be a job or a situation or an experience or a mentor or something like that that will propel or change a person's career trajectory into kind of like leadership. Normally for me, for example, it was like my boss's boss left, my boss left, and suddenly I got two promotions kind of like in one fell swoop, and therefore you just have to deal with it. And at the time you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? But actually it's the thing that shaped you. Do you know what I mean? If there was that moment for you looking back in your career that kind of put you on that trajectory, what would you say it was?
Ooh, it's kind of negative, because I achieved a lot by my mid 30s, and I had kind of a moment of clarity that I didn't want to be working for large companies. I don't mind working on them as on the board, but I don't want to work inside them. And I was 35 years old, and went to work for Andrew running 8 restaurants, and it was the best thing that happened to me, because he said you need to remind yourself what makes you so excited about doing what you do. So for me, it was going from the top of the pile, and running the best, really was the best food-led businesses. With Scottish Newcastle, which was an absolute pleasure and delight. And I just wanted to get my hands dirty again. And I went to do some turnarounds, and I did some franchising, and then I met Simon Woodruff, and I was ready for it. But I had to almost detox from the corporate hubris and self-belief that is me, to remind myself I could do it, but I had to get my hands dirty doing it. And then doing Yo Sushi was kind of it was pretty obvious to me what had to happen next, because I knew the rungs we were going to go through, but I knew that I could still do it. And I think that sometimes, when you are jolted into reimagining who you are, that they can be transformational as well. But mine was self-induced. I just thought, no, you can own your own business. You don't have to work in large companies. And now, bizarrely, I end up working with very large companies and trying to help people be entrepreneurial within them. Um, I suppose that's what my kind of thesis is. But it's quite tricky to pull it off unless you have a break. But I think Andrew Guy probably gave me that break, but it was a bizarre reverse. I'd done all the promotions, the rungs of the ladder, by the time of 35, and I would be, and end up main board running these businesses by a very different route.
Very good answer. Thank you very much for that, Robin. Now, for the last question, I've had the pleasure of encountering two of your three children, and both seem to have you on a pedestal and kind of like articulate, intelligent, well-focused kind of individuals. As a father of twin 13-year-old girls, I think you should actually, I think I'm going to start a self-help group about kind of like, just kind of like how to get people through the teenage years and come out the other side. But that's a whole other kind of like webinar stroke a session down the pub. But like in terms of like, how to balance the shift between kind of like, because we all work incredibly hard, we all want to be at home, we all want to be part of our children's lives, we all want to be role models to our children, we all like the words please and thank you. I'm very much at that stage at the moment. But in terms of kind of like, how you've kind of like, managed to bring them along in the journey, like how have you done that? How have you stayed involved with them and been kind of like an active father and had an amazingly successful career?
Um, I'm not sure they would hold me in a pedestal. They're extremely grounded and disrespectful to me when they want to be. But I mean, all credits to my wife, frankly, who did all the heavy lifting when I wasn't working. But I was very present a week, when I could be. That was the deal. I don't go and play golf all weekend. My children are They're inquisitive. They are very well traveled. I mean, that's the best thing we ever did with them by taking them to extraordinary places and not going to five-star resorts, whatever. We actually we backpacked around the world with these kids from a very very young age, and then they've all, if any advice to anybody is, I had a year off traveling from it to university and had a year overseas. We all three of them have done it. They've backpacked or traveled on their own for a year. So massive growing up going on. They've all lived overseas for a year as well, and they end up being proper well-formed adults at the end of it. And they love hospitality. They've all worked in it. I'm not sure any of them will actually continue to work in it for the rest of their lives, but they have a healthy respect for what giving service means, and what good looks like, and they have strong values, and they're always, and to your point, they're very respectful of people giving service and know how hard it is. That's I have drummed into them, and they kind of grown when we go out, and I have to talk to people. I do talk to people because they know it's a bit of a busman's holiday, but they often see stuff before I do. So. But I'm very blessed. I mean, I'm very, very lucky, and I love my children, my family. I'm extremely lucky.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great note to finish it on, Robin. Thank you so much for taking the time for having a chat with us. I'm sure you will find the next unicorn investment very, very, very shortly. If you haven't already, I can tell by that smile on your face already. But thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us. I really appreciate it.
That's a great pleasure, Chris. Thank you very much.